Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. So I'd like to bring our meeting to order. And this evening we have a joint meeting with the Town of Groton Select Board and the Finance Committee and the Town of Dunstable Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Board. For everybody who's here, I think you might need to call your selective boards and committees to order.
I'll call the Groton Select Board to order, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dunstable Select Board is called to order.
Thank you.
Dunstable Advisory Board is called to order.
All right, does that cover everybody? We got a big group tonight, and unfortunately we don't have enough room, tables, or space to put them. So for comments, I'll ask everybody to come to the microphone to speak. I don't know if everybody has a select a spokesperson for their group. We're going to have a presentation, a joint presentation from the Town of Groton, the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District, as well as the Town of Dunstable. And I believe Sherry, Mark, and Jason, who's up first? Mark?
Mark.
Okay, and we have the presentation up. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you very much. This is the report of the Town Manager's TRICOM Working Group, and so I'll just go through it very quickly. Fiscal year 24 budget development was particularly difficult. The town had a very, very difficult time putting the budget process together. Our budget process starts before the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District and the Town of Dunstable's budget process starts. We were required to get our budget done by December 31st. So what ended up happening is I had to get an estimate from the school district far in advance of when you would ordinarily put your budget together. And based on that, the district provided an estimate in December of 22 that was very, very conservative, and it put the town of Groton's budget out of balance. Next slide, please. So due to a change of the governor of the Commonwealth, the budget from the state was also late. We usually get the first estimates from the governor by the end of January, but because of the new governor, they had an extra month, so that didn't come in until March 1st. The town of Dunstable started their process late. They were transitioning to a new town administrator. So a usually cohesive budget process was anything but when it came to developing the budget. So to avoid a repeat in fiscal year 25, the town proposed forming a working group that would start in the summer of 23 to put the budget together for next year. So we put together what we call the Town Manager's TRICOM Working Group, which included representation from the Groton Select Board, the Groton Finance Committee, the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District Committee, and of course the town and the school's administration. Serving on the committee was myself, the Assistant Finance Director from Groton, Patricia Dufresne, Dr. Chesson, Sherry Kersey, the Business Manager, Allison Manugian and Matt Pisani from the Groton Select Board, Bud Robertson and Mary Linsky from the Groton Finance Committee, Faye Rayner, Brian LeBlanc, and Rosanna Casavecchia from the District School Committee. My finance team also played a very important role in this, represented by our Treasurer-Collector, Hannah Moeller, Megan Foster, our Principal Assessor, Don Dunbar, our Town Clerk, Melissa Doig, who's our Human Resources Director, and Kara Cruikshank, who's my Executive Assistant. So the first meeting took place on June 12, 2023. In order to provide a budget recommendation for fiscal year 25, the committee determined that the following steps and tasks had to happen. We wanted to review current spending, comparing it to comparable communities and school districts. We wanted to develop preliminary revenue projections for fiscal 25 through 29. We wanted to develop spending assumptions so we knew exactly what we were going to be spending. And we wanted to put together a 5-year financial plan that included the spending from the school district and the town of Groton. A specific set of criteria was established to determine what the comparable communities would be for the town of Groton. We looked at population, residential versus commercial, industrial percentage of property, average single-family home value, average single-family tax bills, single-family tax bills, a percentage of the value, and some information from the Department of Revenue relative to the comparable communities' per capita income. Based on this, there were 5 towns that we felt were comparable to Groton: Georgetown, Hamilton, Hanover, Norfolk, and Swampscott. And then we decided, what did we want to compare? And we have this list of criteria they have up on the board, including the total municipal expenditures, total educational expenditures, the percentage of municipal expenditures broken down by the categories that we set our budget at, the stabilization fund balance, local receipts, unrestricted local aid, and free cash as a percentage of the budget. You may ask, why did we use fiscal year 22? That's the most recent data that we can get from all the communities, because all those reports were filed with the state over the summer. The town accountants in the various towns don't usually submit the data from the previous fiscal year until September. I believe it's September, Patricia. So FY22 had the best information, and that's what we went with. So what we found from our comparable community studies, the Groton Stabilization Fund balance is average among those of our comparable communities. However, given rating agencies' focus on municipal reserve balances, we think we should increase our stabilization fund because we want to be able to maintain our AAA bond rating. Groton, for the most part, is average with the comparable communities when it comes to municipal expenditures. We had one exception for that in our Culture and Recreation Department. Our country club has been very successful the last couple of years, so we decided to remove that because not all of the comparable communities had a country club. But even after taking that out, we spend more money in culture and recreation than our comparable communities, and the reason for that is our library. The town has always been committed to spending a lot on the library. It's been in survey after survey, the community wanted us to see that, and that's exactly what we're doing. In addition to that, Groton has the largest percentage of local receipts to offset operating expenses. We also have the lowest percentage of unrestricted local aid to offset operating expenses, which is very similar to what happens with the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District. The state does not support local services in Groton to the extent that it does other communities. And our free cash balance as a percentage of operating budget since 2018 is in line with comparable communities. Based on the report, the working group concluded that municipal spending is in line with comparable communities. And we think that was really important to show that our spending is in line with our peer towns. The school district also conducted a study which was a lot more exhaustive than the one that we did on the town. They developed a report called Groton-Dunstable Regional School District by the Numbers. They looked at demographics, the budget, staffing and allocation of resources, special education, and academics. Very important. They had several communities that they looked at, but 4 specific communities were considered comparable to the school district because of enrollment, and that's Bedford, Linfield, North Reading, and Westwood. What we found with that is per pupil expenditures by the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District were below the median from 2012 through 2021. The level of budget growth was necessary just to meet and bring us up to the median level of expenditures with comparable districts. With regard to staffing, we're average among all the major categories, and that includes administration pay, principal pay, starting teacher salaries. The only area where we were a little bit above the salary areas and a little bit above the median was where we are with the number of teachers per 100 students, and the number in our top step teachers were slightly above the median as well. Groton-Dunstable expenditures are aligned with other comparable districts, falling in the median or lower with the exception of expenditures on benefits. Groton-Dunstable's identification of servicing with disabilities are aligned with other communities, and this to me is the most important finding that we came up with, and that's the academic performance is equal to or better than the comparable communities despite the fact that we spend less per pupil than the comparable communities, and that's a testament to the work of the school district. Similar to the municipal comparable study, the working group concluded that the district spending is in line with comparable communities. Again, another very, very important finding. The next step that we looked at was revenue projections. So the things that we looked at that make up our revenues are state aid, other available funds, local receipts, and the tax levy. With regards to state aid, next slide, please. As you can see here, we are not counting on major increases over the next 5 years in state aid, and I think Dunstable will probably see a similar thing. The state just does not support Groton to the extent that it should, in my opinion, and they certainly don't do that with the school district. So we're looking at very minimal increases over time with unrestricted local aid. Next slide. Other available funds makes up our capital stabilization fund, the stabilization fund for the school district in terms of their capital budget, our ambulance receipts, and free cash. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time right now on free cash. With regards to the municipal budget, we only use free cash in budgetary expenditures that are one-time, not recurring. So, for example, we pay bonuses to our department heads based on the previous year's performance, and it does not go to their base. So that money is taken from free cash because it's not recurring. It doesn't, raises aren't guaranteed each year. In addition to that, we pay some debt service out of it, and we also use it for, there's one other category here, and I'm drawing a blank. OPEB, our contribution, thank you, our contribution to OPEB. So we do not, and for the town of Groton itself, we do not use free cash to offset the operating budget, and that's a very important fact about the school district when we get to what we're doing for next year with regards to the school district. Local receipts, as we said, supports 11% of the operating budget. Again, it's a very healthy number, but we're being very cautious and conservative as we go forward. But it's still a very large percentage, and it's the largest percentage of all our comparable communities in terms of the offset. The tax levy, of course, supports 73% of our operating budget. And what we did here is we looked at the normal 2.5% increase, and we took a look at new growth, and we felt that every year, based on some of the projections coming from our planning board and the like, that we would be taking in some $15 to $18 million a year in new growth to help support the operating budget. So those are very, very important numbers. So when you look at our revenue projections for the next 5 years, you can see that the anticipated increase is about $7.5 million in growth over the next 5 years, which to me is a very healthy growth and a very robust economy in the town of Groton in terms of growth based on the normal 2.5% increase, new growth, and our estimated receipts. So now we had to look at our expenditure assumptions, and this was the most important part of the study. So looking at the school district, teacher contracts are expiring. We have to assume salary increases based on contracts settled in other districts. Obviously, the school committee is in the process of collective bargaining. We can't get into details right now, but they are carrying a number based on settled contracts of other districts. They're eliminating all dependency on the excess and deficiency fund to support the operating budget. As I said before, the town of Groton does not use the E&D account or our free cash account to fund the operating budget. The school committee for the last several years, in an effort to help the towns of Groton and Dunstable meet their needs or meet their obligations to the school district, have used the E&D fund for recurring expenses in the operating budget. That is not good practice, and that's something that we do not do in the town of Groton. So the school committee has made the decision not to use that at all and to get rid of it, and that's a very important decision, and I applaud that decision. New positions are needed to maintain services, including teachers, counselors, and maintenance employees. They're looking at a 10% increase in health insurance and a 10% increase in utilities, plus $100,000 for irrigation and bottled water until we can figure out a new source of water to the school, which the Groton Town Meeting will be dealing with on Saturday. Municipal expenditure assumptions, 2.5% increase in personnel costs. County retirement is expected to grow at 6.5% a year. Health insurance at 9%. Minimal increase in expenses. And in FY25, it's anticipated that the Neshoba Tech assessment will increase about $250,000. And the reason for that it's an anomaly that happened. Usually Groton sends between 12 and 14 students a year to Neshoba Tech. And our budget has been pretty consistent. The problem is 4 years ago, for some reason, the freshman class only had 4 students. Groton benefited that year by seeing a major decrease in its assessment to Neshoba Tech. Unfortunately, those 4 students graduated and 14 students came in. So we're going to see a major increase in our assessment to Neshoba Tech next year. Based on that, we put together the 5-year projection, taking in those expenditure assumptions, taking in the revenues, and you can see over 5 years we're projecting an $11.3 million deficit over 5 years. So even though we have $7.5 million of anticipated new revenues coming in, it's not enough to support the proposed operating budget or the projections. And I will say that our projections are very conservative moving forward. You saw them up on the board. They're not extravagant. There's no growth. There's no additional positions looking for on the municipal side, and the only new positions that they're looking for on the school side is necessary to maintain class sizes moving forward. No new positions. That's a very important part of our assumptions. So to address an anticipated $11 million deficit over 5 years, including a $4 million deficit next year, there are 3 options that the working group looked at. 1, we can reduce the anticipated fiscal year proposed budget by $3.9 million. The second thing we can do is we can look for a 1-year override of $3.9 million to eliminate the projected increase, or we can seek an override of $10.4 million to eliminate the projected 5-year deficit. So those were the 3 things we looked at. Going into a little bit of detail with those, to reduce the anticipated budget by 3.9, the Select Board Finance Committee and the School Committee had agreed in the past to share in any budget deficit by the district absorbing 60% of the deficit and the town absorbing 40%. The reason we do that is because 60% of our budget is schools, 40% of our budget is town. And that has been something that we have talked about in the past, and as a matter of fact, that's what we did last fiscal year to balance last year's budget. So if we did that following through into fiscal year 25, the district would need to reduce its budget by its assessment to the town of Groton by $2.3 million, and the town of Groton would have to reduce its budget by $1.5 million to do that. The reduction required by the school district would actually be more than 2.3 because you have to factor in, if they're going to lower Groton's by 2.3, they would have to lower Dunstable's by that percentage share of the district. So their cut would actually be between $3 and $3.4 million. And I believe, Sherry, you're going to go into a little bit more detail on that when you present. These reductions would continue in subsequent fiscal years based on our revenue projections, and without any new revenues, it would actually be worse every year, that you would have to see a reduction of about $1 million in the town's operating budget if we just did that one-year reduction. It wouldn't just end in fiscal 25. It would continue in future years. So what would happen in the school district? There's two ways to look at school cuts. You can look at non-core classes, which would be no curricular coordination from K through 12, no whole child education, a degradation in the record keeping, no support for discipline, limited social emotional learning supports, no sports, no full-day kindergarten. Option 2, to make that cut, you would have to look at class sizes, which means you would retain music and art, but you wouldn't have a library curriculum. You'd have significant increases in class sizes, K through 12. You'd see a degradation in records and parent interactions with the schools, no support for discipline, no sports, no full-day kindergarten, and no K through 12 curriculum. You would see a real reduction in the overall schools. The municipal budget would also see a very significant reduction in budget. We normally increase our budget about $600,000 a year in operating expenses based on health insurance and pension and things like that. But we would have to cut our budget by $1.5 million to make this work. So it would cause an 11% reduction in the municipal budget because we do have some fixed costs that we have to pay, like the Middlesex County retirement. To do that, we'd eliminate most administrative support in the various departments. Town hall hours would be significantly reduced, meaning limited access by the public. And we talked long and hard about this one. This is not a threat, and it's not trying to scare anybody. It's just a fact of life. Our largest budget is public safety. To make cuts to get to $1.5 million, we would have to eliminate police officers and firefighters and reduce, and we would have a reduced number of those officers and firefighters per shift, which would slow responses and increase times for medical emergencies. And we would also be subject to a significant increase in overtime, or we would get an unfair labor practice because within the police department budget, we have a minimum manning, which means we have to have 2 officers on every shift. And we would have to fill shifts with overtime. And it would be, as I'd like to say, a kabuki dance trying to figure out how to balance those two things. We would also see an elimination of DPW workers, which would lead to a reduction in hours at the transfer station, delaying of maintenance of roads, and of course snow removal operations in the winter would suffer. We'd see a significant reduction in hours of operation at the library and the Council on Aging because those make up the major portion of the culture and recreation. And to absorb an 11% cut, those two would have to take on the brunt of it because the country club makes money. And the last thing we want to do is cut that out. We had a profit of $119,000. That's a major revenue source to the town. We want to maintain the country club. We would also lose $30,000 in direct state aid because the library would no longer meet their minimum appropriation requirement. And then the town would need to consider further reductions or use free cash to cover unemployment expenses. So option 1 is really not a really good option for either the school district or the municipal government. Option 2 is to seek an override of about $4 million. It would provide the needed revenues to eliminate the deficit in 25, and would allow the school district and the municipal operation to maintain services in 25 and then further study potential additional revenue sources in future fiscal years and beyond. It would essentially delay what we're presenting to you tonight by 1 year. Well, this is a short-term fix. As I said, it doesn't solve the problem, and we would still be facing that again. A $4 million override in Groton would add $1.54 to the tax rate based on this year's values and cost the average taxpayer, which is a home value of $633,000, an additional $976 next fiscal year. Option 2, could you go back to the slide? As you can see from option 2, it eliminates the deficit in 25, but it does not shut us down. We still have about a $7 million deficit projected over those next 5 years, and we would have to come up with something in those years to offset that deficit. Option 3 would be to seek an override of $10.4 million. Many municipalities have utilized a multi-year approach to ensure that services are provided and needs are met over a longer period of time. A multi-year override will eliminate the deficit for both the town of Groton and our assessment to the school district over the next 5 years. It does eliminate for the 5 years, but we think it would probably be longer, like 5 to 8 years, depending on increases in state aid and local receipts. It's a very conservative estimate at this time. And most importantly, it avoids presenting override requests to taxpayers multiple times, which really results in budgetary uncertainty and continued fiscal crises. So we really want to eliminate that. And as you can see now, where we had an $11 million deficit over 5 years, that override would put us about $500,000 above the norm within 5 years, which would eliminate all uncertainty and allow us to fund both the town and the potential school district assessment over that time. This chart I put up here shows what the impact is between what a normal increase would be without an override and what the override cost would be. It's about $4,500 or $4,300 over 5 years, and it would cost the average taxpayer an additional $551 a year over an average of 5 years, with the largest increase being in the first year, and then you can see it decreases in subsequent years. So the conclusion of the working group is we believe that we conducted a comprehensive budget analysis. It's probably the most significant budget analysis that we've done in the town of Groton in the 15 years that I've served as your town manager. The working group is absolutely convinced that it's critical to maintain the high quality services that the school district and the municipal operation of the town of Groton provides. These budgets will require community support, and the report created by this working group is intended to guide discussions on the fiscal year 25 budget. So specifically, Monday night, October 30th, by our town charter, the Finance Committee and the Select Board have to get together and provide budget guidance to the town manager to prepare the fiscal year 25 budget. We believe this report will give them the needed tools to make that decision and that recommendation. I know I went really fast, but I know you have a lot to do tonight, so thank you very much for your time.
I don't know if we want to take any questions between presentations, because Sherry, I believe you're up next.
No, Jason's up
Jason,
next.
you're up next. Is there any questions, or shall we move on to the next presentation? Yes, Peter.
Real quickly, a minor point. As far as the comparables go, why weren't other, regional school districts using comparables?
So we
Or
use,
maybe they were. I just didn't.
we use 10 school districts, as we refer to as our market basket. This was actually voted on by the school committee and approved by the select boards about 7 years ago. We started out with 50 towns. We removed towns that their per pupil expenditure was too many standard deviations from ours. We removed school districts that their enrollment was too far. We moved school districts that were more than 50 miles away. There was a whole criteria. Katie Novak was actually the one that did this because there was a lot of, every time we wanted to compare the school district to somebody, everybody was picking different places. So we wanted to use the same 10 schools. Of those 10 schools, 4 of them have almost within 100 students of us. So while, if you look at the Groton by the numbers, which I gave to Mark, which I believe was distributed some time ago, that has a comparison to all 10 school districts, but 4 of those have enrollments that are almost exactly the same as ours. So there are some that have a little bit smaller, there are some that are a little bit larger. So we're actually comparing ourselves against 10 school districts. Why don't we use regional school districts? Because some of them are much larger, some of them have larger per pupil expenditures, some of them have a great many higher numbers of students that are on free and reduced lunch or ELL, and we need to compare apples to apples as much as possible. But there are several school districts in there that are regional school districts, one of which is Acton-Boxborough.
I just identified 4 that met the enrollment.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, Jason?
Thanks.
It's going to take me a minute. I got to switch.
All right. So while you're doing that, I don't think I know everybody here. So I'm Jason Silver. I'm the new town administrator that Mark was talking about in his slide presentation.
So we have a PDF, so that's, you're just going to have to tell me when you want to go on to the next slide, okay?
Okay, yeah. You go ahead.
All right. There we
So
go.
this is just a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about. First, you can keep moving. The first slide is, first section is going to be about FY24, just because I think this fiscal year's budget kind of provide some context on where the town is financially. So this fiscal year, last budget cycle, we asked for a 301.
Jason, could you get real close to the microphone? Otherwise, the guys up back have to adjust it. We get a lot of feedback, and the people at home can't hear you. So I don't know if you
Okay.
can move that up a little bit.
Either
You have
that
to
or
be
you can
about
move over here
this
if you
close.
don't want to do
I'm
that.
short, and this is low. Can I?
Sorry,
raise
just
this
want to make
one?
sure
No,
everyone
it's
can
all
hear
right.
this.
No.
Thank you.
Yep. Is that better?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
I feel like Bob Barker. All right. So in FY24, we asked for a $301,000 override. It passed town meeting. It failed, unfortunately failed at the ballot. So the failure of that override resulted in a variety of reductions in municipal departments. And as it says up there, we did fully fund the district's assessment. Next slide. So here are some of the, it's a little cut off, but here are some of the, there we go, thank you. Here are some of the impacts that our municipal budget experienced. So $85,000 in police roughly was cut. The major impact of that reduction was one police officer position on the overnight shift. So now in Dunstable, there's only one police officer overnight. Fire department experienced almost a $53,000 reduction. Again, the major impact of that reduction was going down from 2 per diem firefighters during the day to 1 per diem firefighter during the day. Fortunately, we had a private donor step up and actually fund that second position. So for this fiscal year, it's a Band-Aid, don't get me wrong. But for this fiscal year, we are able to fund that at staff the fire station at 2. Highway, now this was a new employee. We have, we currently have three highway employees plus the superintendent. We were trying to add an additional employee so that we could have 2 crews of 2. Unfortunately, that failed. And then a variety of cuts for park selectmen and treasure collector. So in addition to those reductions in FY24 for this fiscal budget, we also had to increase our free cash support to our operating budget by $95,000 to $574,343. Now, unfortunately, we are in a very similar position as the school department using E&D. We're using free cash to plug our operational hole each year. And as you see, I think on the next slide, no, not the next slide, but an upcoming slide, how that's growing over time. You can go to the next one. So these are just generally the impacts that the town school side saw. We, on the town side, saw a reduction of almost $160,000 overall in our town budget, operations and debt service, schools, the regional school district, Groton Dunstable Regional School District saw an increase of $471. Next slide. So I do want to preface some of these, some of this information here. This is a snapshot in time. So these are based on projections and assumptions. They are not definitive numbers. We are in the middle of our budget process. So one thing I will guarantee, these numbers are going to change. I think these are very close to being our numbers, but they're not the final numbers. So we are still a little behind the town of Groton. We have tried to start our budget process earlier to better align our budget with the town of Groton in the school district. So we're working hard at that, and hopefully over time we'll get better and better and better. But I just do want to preface some of these slides as these are, it's a snapshot in time. I know already that some of these numbers are going to change, but it does give us a rough idea of the financial condition of the town. So I'm not going to go through all this, but in general, what our forecast assumes is a 2% increase in salaries, 1% increase in general expenses, 2.5% contract services, and 2% in utilities. Next slide. So this gives you an overview of our revenues. The real point of this is we're in probably like every community in the Commonwealth, we heavily rely on our tax levy on real estate taxes to balance our budget. And outside of that, we do not have as a diverse revenue stream as the town of Groton or many other communities. We're a small community, we're a rural community. So our other revenue streams available outside of the tax levy is very limited. You can see up there, our free cash use, which is a bad practice, is more than the state aid we receive annually. So that gives you generally an idea of revenue streams outside of our tax levy. It's very minimal. So this is a really important slide because this demonstrates one of the fundamental problems within our budget. And I think it's similar to the school department. So we have seen from 19 to 24 a dramatic increase in free cash used to balance our budget. Why is that? It's simple. Our revenues are not keeping up with our increased expenses. So our revenues are here, expenses here, and the gap just keeps getting larger and larger to fill. So we've been filling it with free cash to try to maintain level services. We're not increasing services. It's just to maintain level services. From 19 to 24, our free cash use has increased by $440,000, 330%. It's a wild number. So we have to stabilize that because the growth is not sustainable. And I don't want to keep repeating this, but I think the schools are experiencing a similar scenario. So in the FY25 forecast, we have reduced the reliance on free cash by $50,000. So we're not pulling it all out at once because we just can't afford to do that. So rather than pulling it out all at once, we're trying to be thoughtful about it and step off it over time, gradually step off it, so that we can, reduce the reliance, but not pull out all the free cash at once to create a real hole, a larger hole than we already have. Go back. Can you just go back one more time?
Okay,
yeah, sorry. So, I think the balance remaining is an important number too. So after our appropriation, the balance we have remaining in free cash is $66,000. That's that's not enough. It's not sufficient. So that's a real problem as well. And we have $300,000 in our stabilization fund. So our rainy day monies, our reserve funds, it is not a good situation right now. So we have to work, in addition to funding our budget, we have to work to increase our balances in our reserve funds. Next slide, thank you. So this is just a breakdown of our forecasted revenue. We only see $110,000 in new growth generally. $750 in local receipts, that's level. And that's frankly a little slightly too aggressive than I'd like to be, but that's where we're at. A 4% increase, that's just a rolling average over the last 5 years. And then the $50,000 reduction in free cash. So I've tried to describe, I guess, what I see as available new revenues for FY25. So we're projecting $402,000 of total new revenue for 25. With the reduction in free cash, that drops it by 50. We're also adding back capital expenditures. We were fortunate this year to have some ARPA funding that we were able to utilize to fund our capital improvements for this year. But ARPA funds aren't forever either, unfortunately. I wish they were, but they're not. So we have to add back, and that 119 is again just a rolling average of what we've spent. So the revenues have to be reduced again by 119, so that gets you to $232,000 of available new revenue for FY25. So then what I've done at the bottom of this slide is just proportion it out based on our overall spending. So 62% is the regional school district, 38% is the town. That's the number. $144,000 or 1.8 increase for the schools, and 38% to the town, 88.5, almost a 2% for the town side. Next slide. This is just a breakdown of percentages for our overall expenditures. 66% of the schools. The next highest is public safety, not to anyone's surprise. Go ahead. Thanks. So based on our assumptions, this will change, but based on our assumptions, these are the deficits for each fiscal for the next 4 years. This, in FY25, it's a little over $1 million. So this kind of breaks out the deficits for the town and the school district. So the town's operating costs, based on our forecast, is anticipated to increase about $178,000. Total new revenue, available revenue, $88,000. So the projected deficit on the town side is about a little under $90,000. For the regional school district, you see the projected deficit for the regional school district is about $977,000. I created this slide just so we could understand, I don't know how to say it other than ability to pay, based on our single-family tax bill, our average single-family tax bill. So we're substantially higher than the average single-family tax bill statewide. So I just wanted people to have some, when we're asking for more money from the community, have some context of what they're already paying. So we also went through a very similar process as the town managers group, what is it called? TRICOM, with comparable communities. And these are some of the factors we use to compare. It's funny, Dunstable is not an easy community to find comps for. So we did our best here, but so this is the grouping we came up with. Essex, Merrimack, Princeton, West Newbury, Hubbardston, Brimfield, Nahant, Sheffield. So the first slide is organized based on single-family tax bill. So we're third highest when compared to the comparable communities. Total assessed value is we're on the bottom half, but on the upper bottom half of assessed value. Next slide. Total spending, we're smack dab in the middle. So that tells me we did a decent job with choosing some of these communities, but we're right in the middle when looking at total spending. And this is all based on FY22 numbers. Those are the numbers that DLS has available. So again, spending categories similar to Groton. We looked at all the spending categories. I did not highlight all of these because in the town of Dunstable, there are several of these that are just so inconsequential that they're not even worth mentioning. So the ones that are important are on the next slides, just so you get an understanding of how we compare. So for fire, public works, general government, you'll see general government we spend the least, and that's percentage of overall spend. It's not the actual number. But for general government we spend the least, public works we spend second to last, and fire we're at the bottom half. Human services were second to last. Now the next slides are areas where we actually invest competitively with our pool of comparable communities. So culture and rec, that is also driven in Dunstable by our public library. The police department, we're second highest, and in education, we're second highest. And I will say, just from a perspective of, hey, we are a community that has very limited resources. How would you want to spend those limited resources? Those three areas are not the worst areas where you'd want to invest in. So it does make some sense that those areas have been the focus of the community to make sure we're investing properly in. So this is a revenue outlook based on our comparable communities. You'll see that Dunstable relies on its tax levy as a percentage of its overall revenue the most by a fair amount. So again, it just reiterates the fact that the tax levy is the major contributor to our overall revenue, and any other alternative revenues are very, very minimal. Okay, so this is trying to give you all some understanding of the magnitude based on our overall spend on the town side. So this 1.06 deficit, so if you add up all our highway budget, all our fire budget, and all our library budget, that's essentially the deficit we're looking at for FY25. All of those added up. And actually, the increase of the schools is more than all of those departments added up. And this is just another way just to understand the magnitude. On the town side, all of our expenses all in are $1.37 million. The deficit is about 1.1. It equals to about 23% of our total town operational budget. So if we are to absorb, if we were to have to absorb this without some additional revenues, we'd be cutting a quarter of our town side budget. All right. So like I said, we're early in the process. We've started the FY25 budget. We have also put together a group between the town and the schools to work on the FY25 budget. We've only had 2 meetings, so like I said, we're a little behind Groton. We have a financial forecast and a CIP drafted. Our budget worksheets from departments were due a couple weeks ago. I'm going through departmental meetings now. We asked departments for 2 budgets, a level service and a level funded. And like I said, we're continuing to go through department budgets. And following that, I anticipate very soon we'll convene meetings with the select board and advisory to start picking away at this thing. So that's my, I feel like I didn't even take a breath, but that's my presentation. I'm happy to take questions or wait till the end too. Thanks.
Is there any questions for Jason? Okay. Jerry, you're up.
All right. I promise mine. Is that loud enough? No. Do you want me to stand up? Oh, wait, that's better. Okay. So this presentation is smaller because it's just taking the 2 that you've already seen and putting them together. And a lot of the data we've already preliminarily given the school committee, and it is on the website under the FY25 budget if you wanted to reference it. So again, just reiterating what both town administrators had said, that we had gone through, we shared our assumptions for feedback on whether or not they seemed to be reasonable, and also shared our rankings for where we were for salaries, for student outcomes. Again, that is all in a 96-slide presentation called Groton by the Numbers, and that is in the FY25 budget folder. I'm going to say this many times this year because I find that this is a place that I explain a lot to people, that there's a difference between the amount of the assessment goes up by the towns. Assessment is a revenue source, whereas the percentage that our budget goes up reflects our expenditures. So, for instance, this year's budget versus the budget that we put together as an estimate in the summer is up by $4.3 million, or a 9.13% increase. And we're in the same spot as Jason. You know, our numbers will change. We're gathering the information now, and we'll have better numbers in a couple weeks. The assessment increases, there's 2 things that can make your assessment go up. One is other revenue sources go down or are eliminated, or our expenses increase. Both conditions are happening in the FY23 budget.
Oh, I went the wrong way, sorry.
Just a visual of looking at what the assessments are for both towns this current year versus what we estimate for next year. And as you can see, it's a 14.49% increase for Dunstable and a 16.12% increase in assessment to Groton. And when you add those 2 increases in assessments, that is $5.3 million. Remember, I said our expenses are up by 4.3 million. Looking at what it would look like of the assessments versus available funding, for Groton, when they applied the formula that they have for available funds, we would end up with a $2.3 million deficit in Groton, and I believe that matches the number that you had. And Mark wanted me to make sure to say that with their formula, that does reduce town services. It's not that there's just extra money that they're giving the town that would come at the decimation of other parts of the town budget. Dunstable, again, you can see the estimated assessment versus what this year's is. If they had the 144, which I believe matches the number that you had, we would have a projected shortfall of just under $1 million from Dunstable. And just go back one second. Just to reiterate again too, if 144 ends up being the most that Dunstable can provide, then that means that only the proportional share of an increase could be raised in Groton, which is it's less than $500,000. So that would just make that deficit bigger. Again, wanted to point out this isn't a one-year problem that we've projected. It's going to be a multi-year with the funding gap in the out years, not in 25, but in 26 and beyond, of $1 million roughly for Groton, and between 535 and 633 in Dunstable. And one thing, as we've been starting to get the word out about that there is a deficit, we've heard many times that the school district always says this, and you find the money. So I just wanted to reiterate how we found the money last year, which wasn't finding money in all places, it was making cuts. So the school committee used more revenue from E&D, so we were up to $911,000 in E&D usage last year for operating expenses. The town of Groton added $400,000 more than they had originally anticipated to close the gap. Our health insurance renewed at a lower rate than we anticipated. We reduced an assistant principal at the high school. We reduced a guidance position at the high school. We reduced a wellness teacher at the high school, an ELA teacher at the high school. The vacancy wasn't filled. The technology library FTE at Swallow Union. And then we moved $120,000 of paraprofessional salaries to grant funding, and we moved $150,000 of out-of-district tuitions to our circuit breaker funding. So that wasn't really finding money, that was reductions in using other revenue sources that could be considered one time. The budget challenges that we've been facing include the utilities inflationary, negotiation outcomes that we're anticipating, that we're not using $911,000 in E&D. The towns are not going to use free cash or as much free cash to balance their budgets. And our health insurance has been swinging between 5.9 and 19.9% in the renewals.
Can I just interject for 1 second, Sherry, and thank you for doing such a great job with this, is that the E&D usage is particularly concerning because of the inability to respond to out-of-district placements. So the $911,000 that we used last year, we were extraordinarily lucky that we did not get a student that came into the district that had pretty significant needs, because I know it seems hard to believe, but that $911,000 for tuition in a residential placement or a day placement that required transportation into, Perkins School for the Blind or something like that could easily fall into that amount of money. So not having that E&D makes us very vulnerable to out-of-district placements, which, by the way, last year went up 14.9%, and this next year is projected to go up an additional 4.6%. We have no control over that. That's set by the state. Thank you.
This is my last slide, and this is just to let you know that all of the documents that we have referenced will be in the budget folder, and the way that this is the path that you can find it from the website. Go to the Business and Finance Department, then you'll see a link for the folder. It'll have a listed 2025 budget folder, and then the Groton by the numbers is in there, and all of our budget assumptions are in there, including what the assessment calculations are, and then these presentations will be in there as well after tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I should have said at the end of my presentation, because I went really fast, that the main report, there's a huge report that generated the PowerPoint presentation. That'll be posted on the town's website tomorrow for anybody that wants to go in depth to the numbers that I presented. That report, yep.
All right, we completed the presentations, which is a summary of the work that all of us have been doing over the summer to try to provide the most comprehensive look at where our budget lies now and provide the public with their first glimpse of the obstacles and difficulties that we're facing going into this year. I don't know if our committees and boards have any questions or follow-ups that they would like to ask. And if not, or if there's any comments from the public that would like to be asked. If not, there's a lot of just, go ahead, Jake.
So I appreciate all the time that everyone spent in doing this. My name is Jake Lewan. I'm the chairman of the advisory board within Dunstable. So just going through the report and understanding everything that we do have, information we have available to us, and I appreciate everyone working with us here as we try to understand all the numbers here. The biggest thing that I find concerning as I look through the numbers here is that comparing ourselves to Westwood, Bedford, North Reading, and Linfield just doesn't appear to be appropriate. And I say it doesn't appear to be appropriate because of the district wealth. If you look at the differences between our numbers and the other districts that we're comparing ourselves to, it seems to be just way out of whack. And they're using that number to then compare the salaries that we pay in our community versus those communities. So you look at Westwood, which has 137% of the average district, or the average wealth. Dunstable and Groton are at 92%. I don't understand how we could compare our salaries that we pay versus a community that obviously is 45% more wealthy than we are. And when that's compared by the state, that's not just us, right? So
That's the chart you're talking about, right?
Correct. Oh, very similarly, yes. It's truncated down within the report, but understandable. Yes, it's very close. And looking at the total enrollment, we fall at the bottom of that list of community wealth there, and it's concerning with how we're able to continue to spend at the rate that we are, which everyone has sat up here instead, that Groton, Dunstable, as well as the school district feels that the spending that we are performing at this point has gone above and beyond what is reasonable and has depleted the funds that come from free cash or E&D to the point where we can't continue to do that. And now we have such significant increases that both member communities now have to present their bases, their communities, with significant overrides just to be able to fund this. Understanding that we've put together sort of a doomsday scenario if we're not able to fund these things, but at some point in time we have to look for ways to curb spending instead of looking to just continually increase this amount of spending year after year. And looking at those numbers and looking at what even the Mark's presentation showed, the Grotons across there, you're looking at their assessed amount, and the 11 million, it was almost 9 million of that just came directly from the school. So it doesn't seem to add up to how we're doing it. And I don't disagree that inflation has increased and it has gone up, and we do need to sort of balance out the only the 2.5% that we're able to assess our community. But at some point in time, these numbers just don't work. And we need to figure out a way that makes it work, not just explaining to both towns that this is how much it costs, so find a way to pay for it. I understand we've worked together and we've gotten to points within all of our budgetary negotiations, and we found ways to do it mostly through free cash and E&D to be able to get to that point. But now both of our communities here are depleted to the point that we cannot continue to use it. So where do we go from here? And I can tell you right now that in my mind, Groton actually passing that 5-year override is almost the death nail for Dunstable, because there's no way we can keep up with that spending at that point. No, there's almost zero. And even if we went for a similar override, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be passed, and we're not going to be able to keep up with the rate of spending that is being proposed.
So I think the hard part about having these conversations is, as much as we don't like what has been presented to us, there's been, as you can look around this room, a lot of people have been engaged in the conversation to ensure that we are analyzing, presenting the appropriate amount, type of data, having discussions around that data, and providing the community with a snapshot of the reality of where we think we are. We knew this time was coming. We put it off for a really long time. Last year was a really tough budget cycle, and the amount of free cash and E&D that we used to offset it. We've been doing it for a lot of years. The writing has been on the wall. Now, we've had a couple of things that have complicated that along the way, and regardless of whether you feel as though Westwood is an appropriate marker, we have 10 other districts that have been studied and analyzed, and nobody is ever going to be an exact replica of our district so that we can compare it. But for the most part, with all the data points that we've looked at relative to these are pretty comparable to what we're doing, with some outliers always in one direction or the other, one item or the other. But the truth of it is if you want to provide an education to your kids that is what we provide in Groton Dunstable, which is valued by this community, which is valued by this school committee, then it comes at a cost. Otherwise, we don't provide that education, and we choose to provide something that is below and subpar to what we have grown to expect in this community. And you have to pay for it. And I know Dunstable has a lot of things that they have to think about. Your picture in your community is very different. But it comes down, particularly at the school board, with we are charged on the school committee to ensure that our kids are properly educated, that we meet all the bars legally by DESE that we are supposed to, that we try to do our best with the dollar that it's given, and we've done well to use the dollars that we have given to create academic success above and beyond the monies that we've given. We do better than other districts in that regard. So unless, and as I say, I appreciate that, but and what you say about Dunstable, but basically what you're telling me is we have to figure out a way to make this work, and I agree. But if that comes at the cost of education for our kids, that's a non-starter, because unless you want to not educate our kids to the level that we do now, then we have no other choice.
Faye, I have some comments I'd like to make as well. You guys could be, if you want to keep going, fine.
That's okay.
Okay, if that's all right. I put together some prepared remarks so that I could respect everyone's time and express my opinion efficiently, so bear with me here for just a couple of minutes. First, I just want to say thank you to the peer board members that worked over the summer, the school administration, and the town managers. They've really just given a masterclass on how to organize and present the information to the public, so thank you very much for that. I'm optimistic for the two communities in the district based on the amount of collaboration to date. The main good news right now is that we were able to work together to understand the problem and distill it down to a level everyone can understand. I've personally been looking at this since July, so I feel I have a good understanding of it, but I can certainly appreciate that the board members that were not involved and the public need more time to review it and ask some questions. I'd like to touch on three things. First, I'm sure a natural reaction is that people are going to be upset and they're looking for someone to blame here. I don't feel that this is the fault of anyone at this table or the peer boards. That would be the case if there was a spending or a management problem. That's not the problem. This is a revenue problem. The person to blame is the representatives and senators in the State House. And I want to be very clear, I don't specifically mean our representatives. They've been very helpful and cooperative with us on a number of issues. I mean the body as a whole. There are a lot of moving parts in the town and school budgets. The biggest driver of this situation is the fact that our Chapter 70 money is being held flat by the state due to the legislation that determines how much we receive. This is what's causing us to be in a situation where we have to raise taxes dramatically or reduce services. We definitely should try to get the legislators to change this, but we can't stop or slow down the FY25 budget process. We have to move forward. Second, how we move forward. I really want to hear from the other board members to see how they feel we should move forward. Maybe not tonight, but in the near future. I also need to hear from the public on what they want once we have a chance to digest all of this and they can have their questions answered. My personal inclination at this time is to maintain both the school as well as the municipal services at the current level, since I feel they're of equal importance. I've heard how devastating this would be to either side, and I don't want to see us go down into a downward spiral as a district or as two communities. That's not the town I want to live in. It's not the school district I want my children or future generations of students attending, and I don't want to see my property value decline as a result. I'm certainly sensitive to people on limited incomes and the impact this has to them. We need to find whatever ways possible to provide tax relief, whether it's through the senior work-off credit or other programs that are available for lower income people. And lastly, I'd like to speak briefly on the kindergarten issue. This is an issue that's been very important to me since I've been on the school committee. I strongly maintain the opinion that the school committee should feel empowered to make decisions on the school budget and not the peer boards. I know that in some conversations with peer board members, they've said, at least on the Groton side, that they cannot support an override that includes a shift to free full-day kindergarten. Otherwise, they could support the override. If that's truly the case and community support is less than an emphatic yes, then I would suggest we make it a separate town meeting and ballot question so that the voters can decide what they want. This is the right cycle to present it to the voters. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I understand and respect what you're saying there, Brian. I do, and we've had similar conversations, but I believe, as you were sort of saying, that sort of educating people, and you've been involved in it, and I agree. And I've been involved in it very similarly for the last 5 years and been a part of this and stood in front of this community instead of my own, and in front of my own community, as well as like had representation from the school board at our meetings where we have discussed this for the last 5 years and explained the fact that this was coming and that it was going to get to a point where we're not going to be able to do this. My reference to, Faye, what you were referencing earlier, was when the rest of this program is put out there and you're able to go onto the web and be able to look at things. The reason why I say that looking at these other communities and the percentage and the amount that we're expending of our funds towards things, comparing ourselves to communities that have the resources to pay those salaries that are much higher than what we're paying, is where I get into the point of you're trying to say that we're paying nothing and getting so much more back, but I feel as if our comparison to these other communities isn't fair in that assessment. You can't say that a town like Westford or North Reading or Linfield, which has significantly more resources available to themselves, that they're choosing to spend more money on those teachers. That's why that market basket or the group that we compare ourselves is so important as to whether or not our spending is in line with what it should be. If we compare ourselves to, communities that have significantly more, it skews the numbers to the side that makes it look like we're not spending in accordance with our peers, where our peers are not, I don't believe, are displayed in the report that we have here. So, and we are involved. I don't disagree that we have an issue with regard to the amount of state aid that we're receiving, but that also comes with the wealth that we're talking about here, right? At 92% above, we're in the higher echelon, so it's going to be very challenging for us to get additional state aid. So I find myself in a quandary where I can't quite figure out which way to go with it here, but I know that I have sat here and explained very similar for quite a few years that we have to do something about spending, and nothing has changed. We have not gone down. It has not been level. We have gone up every single year, and there has not been a spot where it has dropped significantly unless we have used the E&D or free cash funding, and just get to that point where we've reached the spot here where we cannot continue to afford it. We do have to go back to our communities and ask for more money, and I understand that's the direction where probably both communities are going to head, but at some point in time, we can't just write a blank check and move forward. And I do have to say that, Brian, I do disagree that you can provide budgets to our communities and tell us that this is how much you would like to spend, but dictating that value to us is not the way we're going to be able to proceed forward with spending. Saying that what this board decides is what the community has to do is not the way that the budgetary system should work. And I believe that's the reason why we are having these communities, we're having these additional governmental meetings with Groton, with Dunstable, because that's the way it feels right now. And that's where it gets to the point where the spending's getting out of control, and it's because that's the way it's going. You're dictating a budget to us, and we have no say in the matter. And that's where we're getting to the point where saying this is a problem for us.
Thank you, Jake, for providing us your opinion and your comments. Do we have any others?
Hi there, I'm Kieran. I'm one of the Dunstable Select Board members. Fun topic here, huh? So my question is more about, so we've started to identify budgets and plans and what it's going to look like. Who are you looking to own the budget and to sell it to the public? And I preface this with saying, I myself, as the former chair of the Dunstable Select Board, worked really hard last year to try to help our town with a $300,000 override, and it failed. And, you know, we went as far as we could to navigate and encourage people, A, to participate, ask questions, and show up and vote, and it wasn't successful. So if we're looking at trying to come up with $1 million, roughly, for Dunstable, who's in charge of that marketing plan? What does it look like, and how are you getting there?
So I think we have a couple things to do. First off, Dunstable has to finish their part of the budgeting. Select Board is going to meet on October 30th and make some decisions about how they think the Groton side should move forward. Once that information is gleaned and we can sit down and we can talk about the perspectives at the table and the decision from the Select Board in Groton, we can better figure out how we need to respond, and we can better figure out how we need to get that information out to the public. This is ultimately the first step. All of this information is public. The work that we've done over the year, this summer has been public. Jason's work, the town of Groton's work, the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District. We have a 95-page document out there of comparables relative to market basket districts, where we fall in a bunch of different markers that people have always questioned about the district, to help people understand and get their bearings on how the district functions to the best of our ability. Of course, once that's all done, we have to, selling it is kind of a weird term, but we have to inform people of the reality of the financial picture as we see it, based on the monies coming in, the assessments that are necessary to fund level services, and how we as our different towns and our taxpayers are choosing to fund it.
Could I make a couple remarks, Faye?
Sure.
So I think, Kieran, it really depends on what direction we go. There's many different routes. I think I made my position clear earlier that my preferred outcome here, my preferred outcome is that the state would step up and do the right thing. I don't think that's going to happen. That's not a choice. So option B is, potentially combined overrides to maintain the current level of services, one on the Groton side, one on the Dunstable side. If that were to happen, I would personally be willing to participate, and I would think that this board would be willing to participate in getting the word out and selling that to the community. If we don't go that route and it becomes separate override questions, maybe one for municipal in one town and one for schools, I mean, I guess it'll have to depend. I'll have to see, how they might be written. If there's just no support and we end up in a super town meeting situation, I don't know what I'm going to support. I certainly support the school budget. Would I support an override in that situation if it was at the 11th hour because we, went through the super town meeting process? I don't know. So there's a lot of different turns that we could take. I really need to hear some clear feedback from the peer boards. I think that it should be, we need to move in the same direction. I think we need to know what direction the different boards are moving. Is the town going to try to maintain level services? Is the school going to do it? We've got two towns we're talking about here. We need some more information. Hopefully that's helpful. Answered your question.
Bud?
Appreciate the question.
Bud?
Hi, Bud Robertson, FinCom Groton. A couple things. One is, we're going to meet after this, the FinCom, to work on our guidance so that we can discuss it with the Groton Select Board on Monday night. So we'll be meeting after this. And based on what we were proposed here, there's, the 1-year override, 5-year override, and no override. We'll be discussing it. A couple things on that. One is there's long-term, this is, it's a ship that's going upside down. I mean, we can't, to go back to what Dunstable said, we have the issue that we're not just under revenue, we're over expensed. We got both problems. We're running at rates that it just can't get there from here. We're running with Groton, we're running with revenue of, well, the plan had 2.5 to 3, but we've been running higher than that. So there is an opportunity looking forward. The spending in Groton has been about 3.5, but the spending when you add the school in there, one has to do with the $10 million or $11 million that you get from the state. It hasn't gone up a lot, but that's just it's about 250, I would guess, at Prop 2.5, maybe 300,000. So it's an issue, but it is not an issue like a $4 million issue. The real issue, if you look at it, is when we said that history said we're in line, the numbers were in line, pretty much in line, as far as spending at the school. But then as we look forward, the spending has just astronomically grown. And that's what creates the issue. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. And the question becomes, if that's a one-time blip, we've got to get the spending, and that's what we're going to discuss when we go to the meeting. The spending can't run at 7% and revenue run at 4%. It just doesn't work. The only math that works, if you want to balance the budget without having override, is the fact that if Groton, I don't know what Dunstable's rules are, how they work, but if Groton has revenue of around 4%, if that's what the revenue is, and that's about the high end of where we've been running, all that we can spend each on an operational level is 3.6%, because 3.6% at the local level equals about at the operational level equals about 4-point-something% at the school, what they charge us, which is the lift of about 1.28 or whatever the number is. So part of this issue is not just figuring out the one-year issue, but more importantly, how do you figure out the 4-year issue behind that? And the thing that worries me about a 5-year override is the number is so astronomically large, the tax rate would go up 50% over the 5 years. Imagine that 50%, like from 10 to 15 grand in Groton. That'd be a crazy number. So we need to figure out how we get through year 1, and then more importantly, how we stabilize those year 2, 3, 4, 5 to figure out what do we need to do. And it's always and as we all know, 75% of the numbers in wages and salaries. So that's what we're going to be dealing with, and we're going to be coming back and work with the select board. But to me, the major issue is how do you get a sustainable budget where revenue equals spending? That basically is without an override, because if you don't, then you're always going to be, every year is going to be an override. Every year, unless you can get those two in line. And the wages, to me, are the biggest one right now. And the school has, obviously in front of it, the wage issue, because you're dealing with your contracts right now. So the question is, how do you use that wage contract to maybe do something different in the skewing of things, whatever you need to do, because we need to get back to a revenue. I keep hearing we're under revenue. We're not. We're over-expensed, because we should be trying to figure out how to match expenses to the revenue line. So we're not going to figure it out here. We're going to be working on it back there. We'll see you Monday night at the select board meeting. And you guys will probably be, I don't know who's going to be, you'll probably be there too, and then we'll figure it out from there. So
I really need to address a couple of things, Faye.
What's
That's
that?
okay. I'd like to address a couple of Bud's comments.
Sure.
So, you used the words astronomical spending increase, Bud. The school budget was decimated after the Great Recession in 2009. The town was not. And we saw the impact to the students, right? It was very, very significant. The student achievement went way down. And so the subsequent school committees had to restore this. And so we've seen the results of that, right? The student performance is back up again. And so what we presented to you is what level services costs. And for some people that are new to the conversation, level services is the same level of service you received in the prior year. And so that's what it costs. And I agree with you that this is not sustainable without overrides unless something else shifts. And so I think the path to sustainability here is lobbying the state to not have our Chapter 70 revenue flat. You and I have had conversations that the Chapter 70 issue is the biggest issue in this. There's many different moving pieces, but if the Chapter 70 issue didn't exist, which is a decision made by the State House, this problem would be a whole order of magnitude smaller. We would find a way to work it out. Without that changing, this is the situation we're going to find ourselves in. And as was presented tonight, the only other paths are to decimate the town services and or decimate the school services. And that's a decision we can make. If that's the way the towns want to go, that's the way we can go. I know I've had conversations with Jake prior to tonight when he was here. He's not very happy with the level of service he's receiving over in Dunstable. I've heard from other people who live in Dunstable. They're not happy with the level of service they're receiving over there. I don't think that's the way we want to go.
I disagree with what you just said, though. I agree, one thing, that the school is in a great position as far as providing good education. It's above the average. I agree with that. And the spending you have today is doing that. That's what it's doing.
I don't think we're above average. I think we're in line with our comparable communities.
Well,
We've demonstrated
in
that.
general, if you look at the schools, how they're rated, and you go to the top.
The whole state?
Yeah.
I mean, we're better than New Bedford or
Brian,
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Brian,
The whole point is
I don't want
the whole point is it is. Let's assume it's good education. That doesn't mean you have to jump by 11% to get the same education. It's good education.
I think what we need to do is go back to the comparables and to go back what your original question was, and I'll leave it at this. I recognize that you had past projections that you looked at for long-term forecasting, and you want to go back to those forecasts and you ideally would like to bring our spending in line in some sort of relative jump from what that percentage was. But the reality of it seems to be is that past projection is no longer valid. And that what we have to look to when we're looking at our long-term projections is whatever we think our new percentage is that carries us so that we understand how to forecast properly. But looking back and what those percentages were in the past, when we came back out of COVID, and I know nobody wants to hear COVID, but when we came out of it, it was a different financial reality. It is in every industry we've been in, and particularly as we've recognized in construction, and the difficulties we had and still have in the construction industry with materials and labor cost. So I think that I hear what you're saying, and I would love to be able to figure out a way where those projections come down to a place where we feel as though we're comfortable. But the truth of the matter is, whether you agree with the 10 districts or not, there's been a lot of work and there is a lot of validity to those 10 comparables. They vary in different degrees to what as how they are relative to our communities, but we are average. We are straight up average with every one of our market baskets. And the spending that we do is not extraordinary. It is not an underachiever. We are average with everybody else, and we spend appropriately. How much we have to spend moving forward is the thing that we are challenged with, but we can't just decide that because we had a past percentage and that worked for us, that's where we need to be, because we can't do that.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we're average, which is good, and spending. And if we're average in spending, why are we jumping from an average spending rate to a rate that's super high, and in there has things that Brian doesn't wants to talk about that we ought to pull out of there?
Because our average jump is as average as everybody
We haven't
else's
seen it
jump.
yet. We don't know that. None of those numbers show what that increase is. None of them.
So
Wages are up like 1.7 million. And there's nothing prior to this where we're average says that rate of 11% growth.
right, nothing previous to this.
But
is
how do we know it's
example
even
to
going
what we're happen-
Why
what's
would we want to
happening
do a 5-year forward plan with an override for 5 years when we don't even know yet what those numbers are? We know in the prior we're average. Good
We
spending,
are making
good
assumptions
education.
based on our current
and an
union
override for 5
agreements, and
years based
we will
on-
have that information as we work through union negotiations. But this level of debate is not productive. And the Finance Committee wants to go back and study this and provide recommendation, which is the right thing to do. We'll have to come back together after the October 30th meeting, regroup, and see where those
Okay.
things lead. Allison?
Thank you. So I'm Allison Manugian. I'm a select board member in Groton. And it's never comfortable, but I have to disagree, Bud, that I think it's kind of random and erroneous to assume that revenue is frozen and that our spending collectively is the problem. I think that, we've clearly gone through a lot of work to show that this is the level of spending municipally and educationally that's necessary to continue with the current community expectations. It may be that those will change in the future, but for now, my expectation personally is that we will continue to respect what the community wants. I think in terms of the revenue, while I don't hold much hope that the district would get more Chapter 70. That's certainly part of the conversation. I think, and this is never popular, but Prop 2.5 is kind of a random number. And if that were suddenly to become Prop 4, that we would be in a different position as well. And then there are various and sundry other levers that we should be looking at locally to increase revenue, whether it's local growth, whether it's investment, economic development. To assume that we have no ability to change our revenue and therefore have to curtail our spending and compromise what we expect, I don't think is fair or legitimate at this point.
Thank you. Becky?
Yes, I'm Becky Pine from Groton Select Board. I want to say two things. One is I really want to compliment the effort that has already been put in to start us all thinking about this situation. And in response to the question earlier about who's going to own this, who's going to present it and advocate for it, it's not a comfortable thing to be telling taxpayers that they need to pay a lot more money. But it will, if we are united, as we are telling the public that we need this money, that increases, I think, the confidence that people have that, yes, they need to vote for this. So I would hope that this process will bring us, we've all seen the numbers. I would hope that we would come to a conclusion that we all support. I think the likelihood of it passing gets higher if we can do it that way. The other thing I want to say is I've been on the select board for 7 years, and in the beginning, at least certainly those first 5 years, every year we would manage to squeak by and have a budget without an override, and we would have a chart of projections which said, next year we are probably going to need an override. And we managed to not need an override. And as I look back, at least over the last 3 years, we got a lot of CARES money and we got a lot of ARPA money. And I'm pretty sure that that is what helped us avoid the need for an override. And, that money is ending, and we are responsible for running our town in a way and providing the services that everyone expects. So the reality is, as Allison said, 2.5% is a very arbitrary number. And I think over the Commonwealth, it's been seen that a multi-year override has been necessary in many, many towns and is the logical way to go when you absolutely cannot squeeze the budget out anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kieran again, I'm back. A couple of questions. Is the support or the projected number, like 14% ballpark or whatever, is that a unified support across all the school committee member reps?
We haven't had time to process the budget. The budget is not complete.
Cool, okay. I just wasn't sure if everyone...
We are in the process of developing the budget.
Sure.
And the appropriate assessments. We are not there yet. We are making sure that we are being as transparent and collaborative as possible to ensure that everybody has a part of this conversation, that the appropriate information is out there, and that by the time we get to presenting a final budget and assessment, that we have done our due diligence and we are completely solid in an agreement about what they see, what they show.
Cool, great. And then my second one comes, and you may not be able to get too far into this, but how does our compensation package compare to those communities that we're looking at? Because I know that's like
there
a
is a
collective bargaining agreement.
presentation of 95 pages called Groton Dunstable Regional School District by the numbers. All of this information is in that packet. I encourage you to look at it, share it with your friends, put it on your town's webpage. All of this information, please share frequently and at every party. It's there for public consumption and for use. But the truth be told is our teachers, our administrators, we are average as we can be.
So
I hear
is-
you. So
You-
one
just
point.
To, no, just
Yeah.
to give you a visual cue. Okay, so this is the white is Groton Dunstable, and everything else is everybody else. Okay, and they're in numerical order. So this is teacher salaries.
This is the presentation.
That's superintendents and assistant superintendent salaries. Those are the salaries of our central office administrators. So you can just visually see it's in the middle or down below.
Sure. So I don't know how many people have read 95 pages of that presentation in this room. All right, so we've got 4 hands. 5, great.
Actually, everyone on the committee.
I was going to say,
has-
I
has
wrote it,
read
so.
Yeah.
I encourage you to create a really streamlined infographic, one-page Cliff Note version.
We're not going to do that. This is a 95-page introduction to our district in which we have public comment on a regular basis, in which each and every question in that presentation has been asked of us by the public, will continue to be asked of us by the public, and is there for them to use. It is very easy, actually, to go through, and you can find exactly what you need in it.
I know, but based on how busy all the parents are within this district and like finding time for that, I encourage you to streamline that.
This is not an easy process, and people need to be informed.
But they're not showing up and voting because they're not informed.
They are in Groton. They are in Groton.
The only other point I want to add to that, Faye, is that one cliff note to take away from that is that many of the school administrators' salaries are actually at the very bottom of the comparable communities, so they are at the very bottom. And one point I failed to make earlier is that you, of all people, have been a great partner through this, so I look forward to working together towards these challenges. Thank you.
Just quickly, to that point, I think it's not a bad idea, and it's something I think Lacey and I might be able to work with you and the board on for, the future for that. So, thank you.
Peter. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Peter.
thank you, Faye. I just had one other thing I wanted to, we were talking a little bit earlier about marketing and everything, and whatever that override amount is we go to look for, we have another 800-pound gorilla in the closet waiting, which is obviously the PFAS situation, and that's going to be a big ask, and it's going to be an override ask, and debt exclusion vote ask of people too. So trying to do that with something else at the same time is going to be a tough sell.
Agreed.
Just an observation.
Anyone else? All right. On that note, it's 8:30. If we don't have any further questions, there should be a lot more work coming. We'll keep everyone informed. Feel free to send questions if you have them. I encourage everybody to go to the website, pull down the information, share with friends. And we still have school committee business to conduct. So we're going to move on. You're welcome to stay.
Thank you to all the select boards and finance committees and town administrators and town managers.
Which document do you want me to put up there from?
Wait, don't the 2 select boards have to
Call the meeting's closed.
Are we doing that in a different place?
I don't know. They're still
You
in
can go
session.
any place you'd like. My office is available. The cafeteria is available. Knock yourself off.
There's a single presentation.
Which one is that? Is it this one? This PDF? That one? Okay.
Can we do the IMA first so I can go home? Sorry.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes, Mark, thank you.
No, it's John's.
Oh, okay.
It's not going to be.
Sure. Happy to do that.
Got to remember it all.
I'm not going to regret that, am I, John?
Okay, I got it queued up. Do you want to introduce Glenn or do you want me to? Okay.
Just give them a second to. You can sit wherever you would like.
But that's the mic you're going to use, Glenn,
but
so.
that's the microphone right there is where you'll do your presentation. And we have it in PDF. We'll bring it up on the screen.
Yes,
You
for
do.
the audience at home, thank you.
Yep. All right, so next on our agenda is the mask presentation of recommendations for our superintendent search.
Madam Chair, members of the school committee, members of the administration, I spent the better part of the last 6 months complaining about not being able to hear speakers at sessions, so I want to be
Yeah, you have to be
very
close to
careful
the
that
mic, thank you.
I will compliment you on one of the best amplified meetings that I have been able to attend. I'm assuming that everyone has seen the information that we distributed, and if you will.
Yes, it was in the packet for the school committee.
Okay, I do have extra copies with me if anyone else needs one. I'm just going to take a cough drop so that I don't start coughing on you. We've provided you with a checklist of action steps that a district needs to take in order to complete a superintendent search process. I welcome the opportunity to respond to your questions, but I do want to explain to the school committee and to the people who will be watching that we built into the timetable an opportunity for developing information to share with the universe of candidates, a timetable that will include meetings with the faculty, listening sessions, and an opportunity to have a listening session with local community leaders and community stakeholders. After speaking about this, I realized that you may be interested in having a larger rather than a smaller search committee to assist the committee in its deliberations. A screening committee is essential if you want to have the capacity to screen and interview your candidates in executive session. Most of your candidates will want at least some element of privacy during the beginning stages of the search in order to just give them some protection from everything that might come with being exposed to the public too early. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can here, but candidates don't want it is no great shame to apply for the superintendency of a district like this, which is a good district that does well. It's no great shame to apply for a district for the superintendency and not get the position. It's no great shame to be a finalist and not get the position, but it's no great honor either. So the candidates are really anxious about getting, not being exposed to the fact that you will be known as the person who didn't get hired in Groton Dunstable. As a result, they do want the confidentiality of an initial screening and an initial interview in executive session. Hence, a search committee is necessary. I've made some recommendations about the kinds of representatives that you would want on a search committee, and urge that however they are selected, they be collaborative, collegial, and willing to commit the time necessary for doing this. And it usually involves 5 or 6 nights of reviewing applications, developing questions, and actually interviewing candidates depending upon the number that you see, the number that you get. So we have you posting the position in early November so that your school committee will be ready to start interviewing in mid-December and possibly be done not too far into January. That way you will be ahead of where most other districts are and have an opportunity to get a look at the best available candidates. I will also tell you that some of the best recruiters for the superintendency are school committee members, members of the community, people who know people who would be encouraged to apply for your superintendency. We have a network. We talk to people. Our website is viewed by almost 100,000 people on an annual basis, or people looking for superintendent searches. In other words, our superintendent search page gets 100,000 hits. We also place the vacancies on the superintendent's search page. They get 1 million hits, literally 1 million hits, because that's where people all over the country go to find out about vacancies for the superintendency. We have the schedules of interviews. We have a lot of good resources available to the search committee, model questions, model guidances. Whenever any part of the search is taking place, someone from our association, one of our field directors or me, will be here to assist in that process. Not because people need to be watched, but because you never know if there's going to be a question of law, an open meeting question, an ethics question, guidance about developing questions themselves, discussions about making sure that the people involved in the search are aware of bias and fight back against inappropriate biases and prejudices that exist in any type of personnel endeavor. You will also see that on page 6 and 7, we have a description of criteria that would define a good and successful superintendent, and decision criteria that you might use in order to differentiate your candidates. We can produce and work with you to develop a matrix so that you can score the candidates if you like. I encourage you, if you do use a matrix, don't be afraid of letting the heart beat the brain in making a decision. In other words, you may find that some candidates really connect with you on paper, and you want to see them. And they may not score as highly as other candidates who have more impressive academic credentials or more experience that might be. In other words, there's no science to this, but instinct can also play a very good role in making decisions. With that, I would welcome the opportunity to respond to your questions. I do want to say that the district profile that we've put together in collaboration with the people in the district and the position description and selection criteria are rather lengthy. But that's okay, because all of this stuff is going to be available for prospective candidates to read. And you'd like them to read more about the district than less. And I think that these descriptions are pretty well stated. And I would welcome an opportunity to respond further to any
Glenn,
questions
one
you
of the
might.
things that I noticed is that the matrix isn't included in this package.
Do you want me to show it?
Yeah, can we?
Did I not send that to you?
I have it right here.
think-
It just wasn't included in the
I
packet.
think that
Oh.
it didn't get.
Wasn't
That's the
included in the
matrix,
packet?
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Can you,
Well,
do you have enough to hand out? to
I have a
everyone?
few copies of it with me, if that's...
Okay.
Basically, a matrix is a list of individual characteristics and professional decision criteria, and underneath you'll see a definition of what those particular categories look like. You have them blown up quite nicely on an 11 by 17 inch piece of paper. It looks kind of small, but we sometimes use that as a way of just reminding yourselves who meets the criteria and who might be stronger than others. I actually I carry my stick drive around with me.
We can make sure that everybody gets it.
Gets a
I just
copy
can't,
of it,
I
yeah.
can't show it and get out of it and send it to everybody at the same time. But as soon as I get out of it, I can send it to
Okay,
everybody.
you have it.
Yes, sir.
You might want to, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 copies of this, which you can certainly pass around. The print is small.
But if you need any specific column blown up, if you just ask, I'd be glad to do that for you.
So in the packet, in the packet is a job posting, a schedule, a list of individuals that we would put on a screening committee. The document that you see there is a matrix that can be used both as a tool to screen resumes, in which it would not be so detailed for the resume screening. It would simply be if they met the criteria, MTSS, DEI, SEI, and it would be a 0 or 5 sort of meet. And then when you're when you're interviewing candidates, then the more developed criteria on the matrix that describes the category would be used to rank the interviewer by 0 to 5. And then we also have in here the stakeholder survey, which would go out, and there's a date in which that would go out, which would query people as to who would want to participate on the screening committee. And what we would suggest is that whoever is to be on the screening committee, those various different stakeholder groups would submit a letter of interest. That letter of interest would go to a point person, and assuming we would have multiple letters of interest, more so than the number of people that we need to fill each category, that somebody would basically draw a name out of a hat, or some sort of very neutral process in which that individual would then be represented. We additionally, there are some stakeholder questions for review that would be part of this package, and interview sort of schedule associated with this, of which I would ask that this committee review and provide comment if the package that has been provided is generally comfortable for everybody, that they feel like they want to move forward. We can take a vote this evening, or we can come back at November 8th for a vote on the package as presented. And I can certainly add the matrix into the November 8th package. Go ahead.
A vote on what? I was reading, sorry.
The package that you see here as the proposed schedule, screening committee, matrix, and posting that Mass can use to start pulling at candidate interest.
Okay. I just have some questions, but yes, once we
Yes.
vote.
I'm sorry, can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry, I have some questions, but once
Yeah,
those are answered,
sure.
maybe we can vote.
Can we maybe go down the table once, see who has questions, and then we can come around a second time?
Roseanne, you said you had questions? We can just go around the room.
Yeah. It says the following are recommended: parents, educated teachers, paraprofessionals, community members. I'm just wondering, are students ever part of this process?
Yes.
There is a high school student on the screening committee.
The high school student, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to make sure, yeah. And, not at the moment, yeah.
Fine.
Sorry, go ahead. If you had something going. I was just going to say, I personally don't have any additional questions myself. I'm prepared to approve this as presented this evening. I know this was a lot of work for you, Faye, and I appreciate the efforts that you put into this. And I know if other people have questions, that's fine, but I'm personally prepared to move to a vote.
Thank you. Yasmin?
I do not have any questions at this time, and I appreciate the thought and the effort that went into making this. So thank you.
Rafi?
I'd actually like your opinion on something under the membership. We have a DEI advisory committee here. That's an advisory committee to the school committee. I would be interested in adding a seat for one of them. Is that something you guys see, or?
Generally, for the diversity, equity, and inclusion elements of the search, you find that frequently from the members of the faculty and the community who wish to participate and may in fact represent those interests by themselves. At the same time, there are search committees, school committees that do add someone specifically from specific working groups within the community. I see, the CPAC is represented. So it's not unusual that if there is a DEI, if I can use that term, a DEI working group in the community, that there's an effort made to designate somebody from that group. Somebody from that group may fit into one of those categories already. If not, then maybe the group has to be enlarged. A concern here, you have 4 parents, 3 teachers, that's 7, 3 more building administrators and students and CPAC representatives, that's 10, and then 7, 8 additional people. That's an 18-member search committee. Right. That's a lot of schedules to reconcile. So 18 or 19 doesn't make that much difference, but just understand that when people are offering their services to be a member of the search committee, they need to commit to being able to attend on specific dates. So, Madam Chair, you may want to think about when you notify the candidate, the potential members of the search committee, you probably want to put some dates out there and say you must be available for an orientation and then to participate on these particular dates.
Which, if we're able to keep to this schedule, we do have a semi-finalist interview schedule in here for 3 different dates, December 11th, 12th, and 13th, that can meet that criteria. It may need to be tweaked, obviously, but.
What invariably happens sometimes, is that you meet with the search committee and someone says, well, I can't meet on Monday nights because I have something, and I can't meet on weekends because I'm dealing with family issues, and I work in Boston and it takes 3 hours to get here from Boston in rush hour. So it can be a real challenge to get those schedules reconciled.
Yeah. Lacey?
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple of questions, and I would like to thank you for the time and effort putting this together. It's very thorough, and I appreciate it. So my first question is, when it comes to like the building administrator, the teachers, would they be selected in the same way by like picking out of a hat, or would they select from their own membership?
No, I think that the idea is that we want to open up the screening committee to whoever is interested. Now and we want to open it up to teachers and teachers who are interested. I would hope that we have more than one teacher that's interested, and if that's the case, that they can submit their letter of interest just like everything else. And if we have more than enough, then we'll just draw a neutral name.
Okay. And then my next question is, with respect to enlisting additional perspectives from like town working groups or whatever it may be, in lieu of adding additional people, could we go to those working groups and ask them to submit interview questions?
One of the questions that we would list on the online survey is, do you have any questions that you would like the candidates to be asked during the interview process? And we get a lot of really good questions that come in from the members of the community, and they are shared with the search committee and the school committee. So there'd be plenty of opportunities for people to pose thoughtful questions for the candidates.
And ultimately, it's the screening committee that will make those develop those questions for the interview process. as they talk amongst the group, as they look at the various different resumes and develop a set of questions around those candidates so that they can better clean their, how well they fit with Groton Dunstable. And I think, to your point, when we're talking about DEI advisory, I think as an advisory capacity, that would be a perfect opportunity to ensure that DEI is engaged by asking them to create a set of questions that they would like to offer to the screening committee as part of the interview process. I think that in this grouping of people, we have a CPAC represented, we have human resources, we have student services, and we also have our multi-tiered system of support candidate, our hire, our MTSS1 coordinator, Jess, which I think, based on her resume and her information, represents that perspective of DEI really strongly. And so I think between the advisory questions, Jess, our student services, parents, and our teachers, I think that we will have a strong, plus if you look at the posting, there is a lens toward DEI in the posting. So I feel like we will cover that perspective really strongly.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, sorry. No, it's okay. I just want to piggyback on what you were saying. The same thought came to me when I saw a member of MTSS. I think that Jess's background in, with DEI, the fact that she was in a district that was very progressive and just very cutting edge when it came to that, having a background with DEI and MTSS, I think she would be a really good fit. So I just wanted to let you know that I was thinking the same thing.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Oh, sorry, Catherine. I'm having a hard time doing this.
Try to help. Thank you. Thank you for, again, putting this together like everybody is saying. Going back to what Rafi was saying, I still, I myself feel like a DEI representative could help to be, to really get the message and advocate for the DEI issues. And I agree, the MTSS person, has a background in that, but they're new to the community with not knowing some history of DEI issues not really being put to the front. So having somebody from that group can really be helping, it can help. Thank you.
I guess, Faye, I do have a comment now, and then I'd like to make a motion. So my comment on this would be that I think that there will be opportunities if there are people who are on the DEI advisory committee that want to participate in the search committee, since there are some parent representatives. So if they want to be on it, they can certainly be on it from that capacity. I think the other thing, that let's just not forget the role of the DEI advisory committee, which is to advise the school committee. And so if they have certain questions or aspects of the search process they want us to consider as we go through, they can certainly bring those recommendations forward to us. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the school committee, the superintendent search process as presented in tonight's packet.
And the matrix that is presented
Correct.
next to you, including...
And the matrix next to me.
All right, thank you. So is there any further discussion?
We have to second it. Someone has to second it.
Sorry. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? No? Okay, so I'll go around the room. Roseanne?
Yes.
Thank you, Brian?
Yes.
Yasmin? Yes. Thank you. Myself, yes. Rafi?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate everybody looking thoroughly at this and approving this. This will help get us moving quicker and help meet our deadlines for January. So it is greatly appreciated. Lynn, thank you very, very much for your 3-hour ride from Boston.
It takes an hour to get from Boston to Boston. I'm fortunately in Cambridge at the end of Route 2, so I can be...
And we'll reach out to you to set up next steps.
Okay.
And get everything together. Len will be our contact person. There's another woman that he works with, which her name is...
Alicia Mallon is the field director who covers this area. Anne Marie Martin is the person who handles the operations and processing of the applications, and I'm the person who supervises them and works on many of the searches.
Right, so Glenn will be overseeing the process, helping to expedite, do the interviews, everything we need to know, any questions we have, he's our guy. All right, well, thank you very much. Next on our agenda, I will go ahead. We have 3 field trips in our packet.
And the second and third one, the first and second one of the field trips are very quick. The boys and girls basketball team from the high school have been invited to participate in a jamboree that's an overnight in Cape Cod. You have the request for this in the packet. And tonight I'm asking for your approval because it is an overnight trip for the boys and girls basketball team to attend this jamboree.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the field trip for the basketball team for the boys Cape Cod trip.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion
I just
on
have
that?
one very brief question. I was just curious why there was a cost for the boys' trip and not the girls' trip. I was just noticing one was 70 and one 0. Don't know, not sure.
I really sorry, didn't catch that. I
Okay.
don't know.
Okay.
But I will definitely get that back to
That's
you.
fine. Doesn't have to hold it up. Was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or concerns? No. All right. In that case, I will go around the room, take a vote. Roseanne?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Yasmin?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Rafi?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
And Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you. And I will entertain a motion to approve the overnight field trip for the girls basketball team to Cape Cod.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
And is there any questions? Okay. We'll start at this end. Catherine?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Rafi?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Brian? Or sorry, Yasmin?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Roseanne? Thank you.
Okay, and the patient people from the high school who have been here all night, and I apologize,
Thank you.
are here to discuss the proposal for the senior class multi-day trip to Disney World, and I would invite them to come down and talk a little bit about it, and then you can ask them questions.
Thank
It's
you for
always
hanging with us
busy.
so
Lynette,
long.
you can pull that mic over there, so you don't have to. Or whoever wants to talk.
Thank you for hanging with us. You got to enjoy all the
Yeah,
fun earlier.
I'm so sorry. I would have.
I'm a budget person, so
Oh, so you found that very insightful, right, Lynette?
all I do is do money all day. So, all right, Matt Johnson, math teacher at the high school, and myself, Lynette Fisher, are the co-advisors of the senior class, and we are here to propose a trip to Disney World for the senior class. We got to spend last year working with 8 fantastic class officers and student reps, plan a prom, run the concession stand, do homecoming, and finally have watched a class get so excited about something in school. Class spirit has kind of been down since COVID, and this class has really come together, worked as a class. These girls were amazing to work with, and they proposed to us, would we be willing to do a class trip? So I proposed to parents, would you be willing to support a class trip? I got a 91% response back from parents saying yes, they would, in variations of what they were. I got some lovely suggestions like going to Hawaii and the Grand Canyon and those likes. But they really stepped forward, and the kids are really excited. It's been a buzz around school this week. So we would like to come to school committee and present our trip and hopefully get approval to move on and start planning a trip to Disney with our seniors.
So I'm going to bring us to discussion. So I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the overnight field trip for the high school senior class to Disney, Florida.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So we're going to move to discussion. Does anybody have any questions, concerns about the packet?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to just thank you for all of the work that you obviously put into this. It's very thorough. I read through it earlier today, and I was really impressed with the level of detail that you went into. And I'm happy to hear that the students are engaged as well. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. I've done 3 trips before to Disney in groups, so I had a little experience with it. So it gave me a little hand up.
Roseanne?
Yes, I too thought it was really detailed, and I'm really excited. I just have a question. I see, reading through like different prices for different specifics,
Yes.
and just being able to kind of get a sense of what just some of the overall, just with the over, like cost $15 for breakfast, this and that. Do you know what I mean? Is there like a number, or is the number that I see on the front the number?
I think I gave you the
Is there-
specifics, like the $15 breakfast, $18. I can give you that because Disney
Right.
sells us
Yes.
coupons for those.
Understand. Is there like an overall cost?
Oh, cost
Do
to
you
the
mean,
student?
Like just to the student, like when so am I, the expectation, do I add,
Yeah,
am I
it's
to add up all these
15,
different
I think
things?
it's $1,514 to the student.
And that's including all of the various different breakdown of these costs?
Everything, and including the higher insurance if we go cancel for any cause insurance.
Yep. What was that number again?
1514.
1514, okay.
Yeah.
And this also was, you know, we've had a lot of conversations, and of course that has surrounded the DC trip, where we talked about diversity and equity and inclusion, and ensuring that we are responsive to all our students being able to access the trip regardless of their need for accommodations or financial challenges. And this trip, based on the information that has given, encompasses that all. And as far as I'm reading, parents with kids that may have needed accommodations have been reached out to. There's been discussions around nurses and chaperones and all the sort of things that are necessary to ensure everyone is able to access the trip and be successful and enjoy the trip.
Yeah, we even added a guidance counselor for that
and
purpose.
a guidance counselor as
Yep.
well. So I
Yep.
greatly appreciate that. We're trying to do our best, including a conversation around the DC trip, and trying to find a way to make sure that that goes this year as well. So I greatly appreciate it. Is there any further questions?
Just a quick comment. Lynette, as you know, Lindsay and I was the first class in 2010
Yep,
to
I
ever
knew
board
that.
a plane and leave for a senior class trip, and that was to Disney. So I'm glad it's coming back around. I know there was a lot of planning for both trips then and now, obviously, and I hope you guys have fun.
Thank you.
So on that note, if there are, do you have any questions? There are no, Roseanne?
Oh, no.
Okay, we're all done. So we're going to go around the room. Catherine?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Rafi?
Yes.
Myself, yes, and Tron rocks. Yasmin?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you so much. We will.
And so the information
We've
I
never been
have
there.
that's come right off the wire is that the reason the girls have to pay a bit for the basketball trip and the boys don't is because the boys fundraised more than the girls did.
I assume there was a reasonable answer, and I'm glad I heard it. Thank you.
So the cost is the same.
All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
So anyway, guys, the next steps would be for you to get commitments from however many parents are going to commit to their students going, and make sure that that contract that we discussed is signed.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Okay, because I need all the copies of
I
those
think
in my
my
office.
thrill share is ready to go out tonight.
All right, great, super.
Thank you.
So on our list, I want you, everyone to know that I have the 2023-2024 school improvement plans for a second read. Ultimately, we're not voting on that, but I did ask Laura, Kristen's not here for a variety of different reasons.
She's ill.
Yeah, she's ill. And so what I asked Laura to do is, the school improvement plans actually are a report. We had a presentation on it. There's an actual format and a report. We've kind of emphasized this year the importance of those reports, the school councils and the engagement and integration of all the various different initiatives that we're trying to get accomplished this year. So I've asked Laura to put those actual reports in our packet for November 8th for us to do one last read and ask any questions to make sure that we're prepared for the next round that's going to be coming in May of this year for next year. So tonight, because Kristen is not here, we won't have them, and also we don't have the formalized report. So
Right. And the form, you will recognize the form is the exact same form as the district improvement plan, except it's at the school level.
So I'm going to move down, if everyone's okay with that, and I'm going to move to the appointment of the new DEI member, because we have some policy stuff to go through as kind of our last type of business, and that takes a little time. So you had a letter, everyone had a letter of interest in the packet relative to a letter of interest from Rachel Leary on the DEI advisory. I'm going to move us to discussion on this point so that we can have a conversation. So I'll entertain a motion to approve Ms. Leary's appointment to the DEI advisory.
So moved.
Second.
All right. So I personally would like to read a quick statement about Ms. Leary's letter of interest. So I've been thinking quite a lot about Ms. Leary's letter of interest, and I am finding myself very conflicted to appoint her on the advisory. In one regard, she has a life story that reflects a diversity that many have not experienced, and that lived experience is valuable when discussing the multiplicity of viewpoints necessary to craft good policy, create new initiatives, and continue to move positively forward the work of the district. However, in another regard, Ms. Leary is new to our district, yet posted a number of derogatory and inflammatory statements on social media without providing validating documentation exclaiming falsehood regarding the superintendent, the school committee, and the aftercare program at Peter Toomey via petition she recently circulated. Ms. Leary's complaint surrounds a personal issue in which she requested an alternative to after-school transportation, for which the district has offered her multiple options to resolve and in which she has agreed upon an alternative that works for her personal needs. Particularly of concern was a comment on social media that states, "My kiddo has had a wonderful transition into school, so this, the petition, is really about confronting the superintendent over extension of power for community." Whenever I look to appoint a person to a committee, I would like to see that that person comes to the committee with good intent, ready to do the work that is important to the entirety of the district, not in service to personal needs. Although we are all differing opinions and we may not agree, we have to work in a way that is productive and collaborative and serves all. However, Ms. Leary's petition and social media posts do not show good intent to me, but the desire to use the advisory appointment as a way to continue her personal agenda. For those reasons, and I'm very sorry to say, I feel I need to vote no on Ms. Leary's appointment.
Faye, can I make a comment as well?
Yep.
So I share all of Faye's thoughts as well. I appreciate that anytime someone steps forward and wants to run for a board or participate in the district, but in this case, I think that we can find someone else. And so I thank her for her interest, but I'm also going to have to vote no on this as well.
Is there any other questions or concerns? Go ahead.
It's quite evident that Ms. Leary is very educated, and her diverse background speaks to her intentions. But listening to Faye's indication and just some of the things around social media and with the school's effort and school committee and the initiatives that we're all trying to bring forward and with our kids, and the efforts that myself being on the DEI committee and in last year, and the efforts that Rafi has actually put forth, and trying to move more of an inclusivity piece around communication, diversity, just kind of building a system of creating something a bit more profound. And communication is a very big, important piece for me. And so, and how we determine and problem solve issues, whether personal or professional, are really important to the process and the growth. We can disagree, right? But it's just essential that we, if we are selecting people that are going to be on the committee, that they share the same perspectives that the DEI community is intended to be for. So currently, unless I'm missing something else, I'm not able to approve this person right now. Thank you.
Okay, so I will say that Ms. Leary's letter of interest clearly shows that she has a good background with DEI. She's very knowledgeable. While I can understand the concerns that have been raised, and I would say that I think it's important for anybody that wants to get involved, I think it's important that they feel that they can voice their opinions, but I also feel like it's important to not use, if you are appointed to a board, you don't want to use that to speak to if you have personal issues or something like that. So I think that it is important for anybody that's serving on a public board that they understand that they recognize that they are representing the community and that there is a way to disagree, but disagree respectfully. In the spirit of inclusivity, though, I am going to vote yes. I think that we've never not somebody to serve on the board, and I'm not inclined to start doing that now. So I vote yes.
Yasmin. So I'll speak to what I have seen. I've had the pleasure of hearing Ms. Leary during a CPAC meeting in which she was very articulate. It's clear that she has a broad range of experience working with children, working with DEI. I don't take any issue whatsoever with the number of years she's been in Groton. To me, that's irrelevant. If you are a part of the community and you are involved in different organizations like CPAC, to me, that's enough. And honestly, she has been in Groton longer than I have. So, who am I to judge? I will be honest and say that I am a little bit concerned in that if a person is interested in being on a committee, an advisory group, a committee, it is important to approach it in a way that's diplomatic, and put personal differences aside. So I think that is something to consider. However, if I look at the bigger picture, I think she can bring quite a lot to the table. Clearly, a very educated, intelligent woman with a vast array of experience with children, with DEI concerns. So I think for that reason, and because she has made an effort and shown commitment to the community, that she does want to create safe, inclusive schools, safe, inclusive learning environments for the children, I'm inclined to say yes. So that would be my vote.
Catherine. Some of the information I've had today, it's my first time hearing about, what has been reported. What kind of stands out to me, again, high education, high experience, and sorting through what was said, coming to a point that, something was offered to her, but she felt like everybody in the community, some other kids should be getting the same kind of support. So I'm voting yes, because I think she will be a good addition to the DEI. And again, she gets a chance to maybe, if people feel like she did not go the right way, maybe then she gets a chance to really, repair those relationships or, get to collaborate with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
I think everything's been said. It's just a little surprised. I don't know what to say, but I'll be voting yes.
Okay. In that regard, then, Ms. Leary's appointment to the DEI advisory is passed.
We have to take the vote, Faye.
Oh, I thought we just did.
Well,
Everyone
we
just answered.
sort of did.
You have to vote.
We'll do it again. Roseanne?
I currently have to decline.
Thank you. Brian?
No.
Yasmin? Yes. Thank you. Myself, no. Rafi?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
And Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Leary is on the DEI advisory. And there you go. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the various different viewpoints, and we'll move forward. We're moving on to policy. And Lacey, you want to run us through?
Sure. Okay, why don't we start with BEDH, which is public comment at school committee meetings. As you all will recognize, this is the second time you are seeing this with a few additions. So this is our second read. Based on the feedback at the last school committee meeting, policy took it back, and we made two notable changes, which you see they are highlighted in green. One is in point number 1, and it basically just clarifies what happens in the event that a member of the public does not sign up. It says failure to sign up will not preclude a member from speaking provided there is time left in the public comment segment. The public comment segment shall not exceed 15 minutes, which can be utilized all at once or divided into shorter comment and question segments throughout the meeting at the discretion of the chair. Then point 2, 3, 4, and 5 remain the same as they did last time. 6 has been added, recognizing that the committee shall not engage in deliberations on items not duly posted on the agenda. The response of the committee shall be limited to the following. The chair, on behalf of the school committee, shall acknowledge and thank the member of the public for sharing their concerns and refer them to the proper subcommittee or person within the district to seek resolution to their concerns. And that concludes the changes that have been made. So I will take questions if there are any.
Okay.
No question, but thank you, Lacey, for adding that. That captured the spirit of what I was trying to say perfectly. Thank you.
All right, so I will move us to discussion. So I'm going to entertain a motion to approve BEDH as presented in the packet.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, any questions? Any concerns with the revisions? No. All right, we'll go down and take a vote. Roseanne?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Yasmin?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Rafi?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Yes. All right. That takes care of BEDH. I have it on the agenda wrong. JJH?
Okay, so again, JJH is going to be the second read. We made several additions here based on the feedback at the last committee, as well as feedback from the DEI advisory. So I want to thank everybody for their feedback. I think that what you see in front of you now represents, I think, a very thorough policy that accounts for really, it considers all students' needs. It ensures that any policy or any field trip that's being planned by the district will include and be planned for all students and allow all students to participate. So I'll briefly summarize the changes. In subsection, D, as part of the planning process, field trip organizers shall consult with staff relevant to the students expected to attend the field trip, which could include but are not limited to the following: a special educator knowledgeable about the students attending, the school counselor, the school nurse, an EL teacher, and or a paraprofessional familiar with a student or student's individual needs. Down at, in the bullet points under section 2C, the last one was changed slightly. A statement from the school nurse attesting that she or he has reviewed the student health records for those students who are expected to travel and that all students' medical needs are known and planned for. And then skipping down to section 4, subsection 1, any additional rules or expectations above and beyond those contained within the student handbook shall be communicated to parents and students prior to the trip. And then section 5, under logistical concerns, a new section has been added at the beginning, which states, as stated elsewhere in this policy, every field trip shall be accessible to all students. With that in mind, as part of the field trip planning process, teachers or other organizers of a potential trip shall identify all barriers to participation and provide a list of any modifications or accommodations to allow full participation. Additionally, trip organizers shall also provide to parents and students an overview of what the trip entails, including any physical requirements or potential accommodations and or modifications that may be needed to allow participation. And then at the end of that section, another subsection F was added, which states, equitable alternative experiences shall be planned for students not participating in the field trip. Skipping down to section 6, cost and funding. Subsection A, any stipend for chaperones and or nurses shall be added to the per person cost of the trip. This policy will not apply to athletic coaches for any overnight trip that they may take with their team. And then subsection F, detailed funding plans must be outlined, including how to obtain financial assistance for the cost of the trip. The detailed funding information provided to families shall not itemize costs related to individual or specific assistance. And that represents all of the changes that we made at our previous policy meeting. I'll take questions from the committee.
Like the others, I'll move this to discussion, so I'll entertain a motion to approve policy JJH as presented in the packet.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, is there any questions relative to this policy and the modifications that Lacey presented?
Can I just state that I want to thank the committee. This was a very difficult policy. I feel like all the appropriate things that ensure equitable access for all students were included in this policy, and I want to thank the committee.
I'd also like to thank the policy committee. I think that everyone worked very hard. I want to thank Dr. Chesson as well. She put a lot of time into considering the feedback that was given and all of the concerns. And so I think what you see before you, it's a policy that I feel very, I guess I'd say, proud of.
Yep, policy's rocking it this year. So I'm going to go around the table, take a vote. Roseanne?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Yasmin?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Ralphie?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Okay, and we move on to policy BDFA. It's a first read.
Sure. Before I get to that, I just want to also just update the committee. There is a companion policy, which is IJOA, which covers day field trips, and that was expected to be in the packet tonight, although when I was reviewing it, I realized that there are a few discrepancies, and so I felt that instead of putting it forward, I felt like it would make more sense to just cover those discrepancies at our next policy meeting. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes, but just to make sure everything lines up with this policy, and that way we don't have two things that may contradict each other. So you will see that at a later date. So moving on to BDFA, which is our first read, and this is the school council policy. So this update basically comes at the recommendation of MASC. They recently made some pretty significant additions to their policy. So what you see in front of you now is everything in white is the way our current policy reads. The language that is in red is the new, the additions recommended by MASC. I can briefly summarize them. So basically it talks about the makeup of the committee. The principal shall by law serve as co-chair of the council. The second co-chair will be elected annually by council members at its first meeting of the school year subsequent to the elections of new council members. The co-chairs will be responsible for the preparation of the agenda for council meetings. The school council shall meet at least once monthly during the school year. Meetings will be held outside of school hours. School council shall use consensus as the primary method to resolve issues and to formulate recommendations. Votes by majority may be taken at the discretion of the principal and Robert's Rules of Order. All meetings of the school council shall conform to open meeting law. The scope of the school council does not require and therefore does not qualify for executive session. The superintendent shall receive agendas and minutes of all school council meetings. The superintendent shall provide copies of these materials to members of the school committee upon request. Everything else down to the bottom, I think, represents our current policy.
Okay. Moving us to discussion. So I'll entertain a motion to approve policy BDFA as presented in the packet. Any second?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Great. Such enthusiasm. So is there any discussion around this particular policy and the edits presented? No? Okay. I do want to say one quick comment about the fact that superintendent shall receive agendas and meetings of all school council meetings. Superintendent shall provide copies of these materials to members of the school committee upon request. I would say that, we should just set up a folder in our on our school committee webpage or within the webpage where they're just present and available at all times.
Agree.
Sure. As housekeeping. Other than that, I'd like to take a vote. Roseanne?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Yasmin?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Rafi?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
And Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. I believe...
Can I just ask a question?
sure, liaison report. What's that?
So does that mean that we don't need to
Doesn't
take
have
it back?
to come
for
back.
some- Okay.
We don't need to have it for second read now. You did so well. Rafi?
So liaisons. The Board of Selectmen, the Advisory Board, Lacey and I, along with the Superintendent and Sherry, were all invited to a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor last week. We lobbied for our town and our schools, and the town administrator is going to follow up with her on some grants and other things we talked about, and hopefully it'll make a difference. Tomorrow there's a union building meeting for 6 to 7:30, meeting at the town hall to see what to do with it. The municipal leaders want to hear what the community thinks, and there will be a feasibility study on what to do with it. Also, there's a special town meeting for Dunstable Monday, November 13th at 7 p.m. in the Swallow Union Gym. DEI, we had a productive meeting at our last meeting. We're starting to create a new list of areas we want to look at that tie into the district improvement plan. Our next meeting is November 6th at 7 p.m. in the conference room. And I want to welcome and congratulate our new member, which we'll also be doing at that meeting. And then Lacey and I spoke. We are going to start up our office hours again. We stopped in June because of the summer recess, but we're going to pick them back up, and we are looking at our first one for November. And once we have a date, we will let the community know. Our colleagues are certainly invited, and both residents of each town are certainly welcome to come as well. And lastly, I know the assistant town clerk of Dunstable had asked about notes, and she reminded me tonight they still haven't been updated on the website.
Notes for what?
Our meetings.
DEI notes?
No. School committee.
No, they're updated. I looked myself.
She told me they weren't when she was
Well,
here. So
then
I just,
she should probably call Joanne, because Joanne's nodding that they're out there, and Faye has verified that they're out there, so maybe she's not looking in the correct
so I'll
place.
tell her to contact Joanne.
Yep, contact,
Okay, perfect.
contact Joanne.
Perfect.
Yeah, because I immediately reached out when I got that.
I know, no, I got it too, but she just mentioned it, so I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Can you tell me where the feasibility study money is coming from?
For the union building?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Dunstable.
It must be
Dunstable's paying for
Yeah.
the feasibility study?
Oh, yeah.
We're not soliciting.
No,
an
the
SBA
district's
grant
not, no.
Or any of that sort of, okay,
No.
just double checking. And Lori, I'm sorry, if I don't write things down, I'm terrible. I have to make sure that I write liaison reports on the agenda, or like.
Well,
my
mine will
to-do
be
list.
quick. It's just a quick follow-up. The presentation next week that I mentioned that Dr. Rachel Kramer will be presenting on Zoom on November 2nd. The subject of it is helping children build skills to cope with stress and worries. And she'll be presenting cognitive behavioral strategies and specific tools, and we'll have ample time for questions and answers. So that's open to families, parents, members of the community, and we hope that you'll join us. It's Thursday, November 2nd on Zoom, and that's been advertised on our website and social media and emails.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right, anybody else have any updates, questions, concerns? No, hearing none. We'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.